What's up, everybody? The Twodashstash Podcast returns. This is episode number 50, titled appropriately The Return. Joining me is some very, very new faces who have just joined the site over the past month or so. Frank Abagnale. Say hi.
Hello, I'm Frank. You can also call me Anonymous. I write for Twodashstash under the name of Simon.
And Evan Hitching.
Hello.
What do you write about? Come on!
You have any articles in the works?
Evan.
Oh, sorry. I'm hearing the echo from Kyle.
No, I turned that down.
I can cover quickly what I write about.
Yeah.
A little bit about general news, but mostly I tend to focus on writing about more in-depth technical analysis of video games and video game design techniques.
Mm-hmm. He's the one who did the delightful analyzing of Blackguards 2. That is on Twodashstash.com.
Mm-hmm.
It is... Yes, I got live chat enabled too. Yay! It is a fascinating article. He also did a recent article analyzing the Order 1886, which we will get to. And Evan.
Now, I tend to write articles talking about specific game design elements, how they affect player choice, how they affect the economics outside of the game. So I recently wrote one about cosmetic items in games, why they appeal to kind of our base human nature, how they affect free-to-play games, how they affect monetization, and how it can be used for good in a good way, and how it can be used poorly. I've got another article I'm working on about the differences between horizontal and vertical progression in games, kind of defining those for people who aren't familiar with them, and kind of building on there. In addition, I've written a couple of news articles, some basic summaries.
Wonderful. Now, for people who have been with the site for a long time, you may have noticed an absence of a certain amount of content. We are getting to restoring the Indie Stash Cast, the podcast, to its regular rhythms. Bear with us. We will be talking with more and more developers. If you're interested in hearing our recent conversations with developers, we actually have one on the site. Chatting with Matt Gilgenbach, who made the game Neverending Nightmares. It's a very, very interesting podcast. I host it myself, so I should know. That discusses how depression and OCD and various other influences went into the making of that game. The one before that was covering a very, very interesting developer who was behind the Quiet Please series on the Xbox Live Indie Game Service. So please go check out our Indie Stash Cast. We very much appreciate your feedback on those. So, recent events within gaming at this time of year aren't very much, or aren't very many, but we do have one major release that just came out, and the reviews are uniformly mixed to negative. The Order 1886, and we had a very, very interesting article by Frank about that. Frank, discuss your angle on the game.
Well, my angle in the game was examining the claims of the developer that the technical limitations of the game led to it being a superior product by being more cinematic, essentially. And of course, most people will tend to be skeptical when a developer says that 30 FPS is better than 60 FPS because it gives the game a filmic look. But I'm not quite sure how many people actually understand why that is a rubbish statement to make. And essentially the reason for it is video games, when you render them with your graphics card, they don't have exposure times. There's no exposure time for the individual frames that you render. If you go to the movies and watch a film, it's typically going to be playing in 24 frames per second, but in each and every one of those frames, there's going to be some degree of motion blur, since cameras have exposure times. And just by examining the difference between different exposure times, even for film shot at 24 frames per second, it becomes very, very clear very quickly why films that are shot for the big screen are exposed the way they are. Because if you start exposing at very high shutter speeds, very short exposure times, you sort of creep closer to the effect that you'll get from a video game. That being, there's less movement per frame that you capture, and that looks like garbage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, The Hobbit infamously was in 48 frames per second, and according to a lot of people, I didn't see it in 48 frames per second, but it looked terrible. It made all movement in the film look unreal. So the Order 1886, of course, comes on the heels of a great debate within video games about frame rates. Now, advocates like Total Biscuit have been saying 60 FPS bare minimum for modern day games, and I am starting to agree. I do understand that the Xbox 360 tried and could not reach 60 FPS on most of its games, so anything pre-Xbox One, PS4 is basically 30 FPS average. I should say.
Yeah.
I mean, like, the other thing is, like, they can make games 60 frames per second, but it's a matter of actually pushing the polygons that they want to push. The more detail they add, the larger the scenery, all that is going to affect it. I mean, it's not like those systems can't run 60 frames per second, but they're going to choose fancier cinematics and just fancier graphics in general rather than having smoother motion.
Yeah, it's like I described in the article I wrote about the Order 1886 and its technical limitations. If you go from 1920 by 800 pixels at 30 frames per second to full 1080p and 60 FPS, that's an increase of 2.7 times the pixels per second. That's a lot.
Yeah.
That's an awful lot of pixels per second. And it's very clear, obviously, that developers now want to push the envelope with these new consoles to give customers some sort of incentive to buy into these systems, because if the games didn't look any different, then of course they wouldn't want to pay for them. I mean, if there's no graphical difference between Assassin's Creed Unity and Assassin's Creed Rogue, wouldn't everyone just buy Rogue?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think you have a good point there. Like, for most people, they're not going to focus on that difference in motion and that clearer fidelity that 60 frames is going to bring. But if they're releasing trailers where their next gen games looks exactly the same as last gen except it moves smoother, they're certainly not going to have systems flying off the shelf.
Yeah, well, I played Battlefield 4 a lot, and I had the Xbox 360 and the Xbox One version. I gotta tell you, the upgrade isn't substantial enough where I could say, yeah, I'll definitely pay $60 for the Xbox One version. I got it for like 20. Like, that's premium free because I already had premium on the Xbox 360. I gotta say, the difference isn't drastic enough for me to say, oh, I'll pay another $60 for this. We're still in that sweet spot, though, of console releases where the games will be largely similar. Because, I mean, the original Xbox still had a significant overlap with the Xbox 360 for quite a while. I mean, the last original Xbox game was released in 2007. It was an NFL game.
Yeah.
So there's still a bit of overlap, so we're still getting out of that. I can't wait to see what happens when developers finally unhitch themselves from the 360 and PS3. But as it stands, we're still getting major releases on all of the consoles, not just Xbox One and PS4.
Yeah, last year there was even, I think it was a FIFA release on PlayStation 2. So
in America or in South America?
Yeah, no, in America.
Trust me, there's Dreamcast games still coming out.
Yeah, that's also partially because
we have one that we've covered on the site, Elysian Shadows. It should be coming out for the Dreamcast soon. which is just amazing to me. And there's been a couple
Yeah.
mention of a couple other games coming out for that system. It's
Well,
absolutely
part of that is that Sega opened up the Dreamcast a couple years back, so you don't have to pay any licensing fees or anything like that to make a Dreamcast game anymore. If you want to do it, you can do it.
Retro nostalgia. If only Xbox, Microsoft and Nintendo would open up their old consoles to just usage like that, we could see a lot of creativity coming out. Just having the resources, the specific resources available, we could see, I'm going to make a game with the restrictions available on this hardware, and I can actually do it authentically instead of just guessing.
Yeah, I mean that's pretty much what the guys did with Shovel Knight. They, coded it and used the color palettes of what an NES could do with just a few exceptions.
I want to just say to any viewers watching, and I know we have a couple, you can suggest topics that we talk about in the chat box, so we'll be monitoring that. But there was this one game, Retro City Rampage. He's actually started life as a D-make on the NES, where he tried to make Grand Theft Auto on the NES.
Yeah.
And eventually he just expanded the concept so much that he couldn't keep it on the NES. But there's lots of potential in stuff like that, I gotta say. But this modern-day generation of graphics, the PC obviously has had great graphics for years. Like, ever since Crysis, at least, they've had hardware melting capable graphics and stuff, and there's always been this resentment that they've been tied to console releases ever since. But there have been PC exclusive games that have been released where I'm staring at them and like, you guys are supposed to be ahead, right?
Yeah.
Just cosmetic differences. There's not really much there that really
part of it does come from the fact that sometimes they're not going to be making the graphics themselves better, but you'll be able to get 60 frames per second or even higher on PC. I mean, if you think about it, like we're talking about console games that are tied to 30 frames per second, and I'm sitting here playing Team Fortress 2, and I'm like, man, I need to get a 120 hertz monitor because I can push 120 frames per second. So I mean, like, even though obviously it's an old game and it's not like it looks that great, PC is going to have a better chance for more fluid motion, higher textures. You may not notice it at first, and all that.
Well, actually, what I was looking forward to with this new console generation, being as they are, both of them, the PS4 and the Xbox One, not the Wii U, of course, but the Microsoft and Sony offerings, they're both now using the x86 architecture, and they're both using AMD CPUs, AMD GPUs. So there's no real reason why, especially for the Xbox One, which runs on the Windows kernel, why those games couldn't be released too for regular old Windows, so that PC users could play, hell, I don't know, Master Chief Collection.
Yeah. I mean, doing multi-platform back with the 360 and the PS3 and PC, I mean, they were all running on completely different architectures. I'd forgotten that Xbox One and PS4 are all pretty much running on that. I mean, at this point, like, there's no reason not to just multi-platform everything. Yeah, it's going to take a little bit extra dev time, but not nearly as much as it used to.
It's a tricky because there have been competitions where people took, hey, let's pit PC players against console players. The PC players absolutely wrecked the console players because console players couldn't be as accurate, as quick as the PC.
Yeah, I'm not
players.
talking about for like
an issue for single-player games.
Yeah, I'm not talking about shared multiplayer servers, even if they have different multiplayer architecture. It's not like the consoles are typically cross-compatible, with the exception of Final Fantasy 11 back in the day. But yeah, Shadowrun on the 360 allowed PC and 360 players to play against each other, and when you're going up against the guys with mouse and keyboard, there's no chance. Now, on PlayStation 4, Street Fighter V is going to have cross-platform play for PC, but that's not really going to be an issue because everyone's going to be using gamepads or arcade sticks.
Yeah, it's not about accuracy at that point. It's more about reaction times. Which I gotta say, I like the feel of controllers because it feels more realistic to be slightly less accurate. Whereas with PC, you're instantly accurate.
Not quite sure if only, but all right.
Oh no, it's like in PC, it's like someone can aim like someone can go like, oh, a turn, and they're instantly on a headshot or something of someone. Whereas on a console, someone has to use the stick,
Still have to aim.
like so,
But you're
and turn.
the term you're looking for is there's a lower skill ceiling on console. There's only so much or so good you can be with an analog stick compared to a mouse.
That's not to say that I've seen amazing console players. Because of the lack of accuracy, there's more of a, from what I've seen, more of a focus on tactical combat more than what I've seen on the PC. Because I watch Rival X Factor a lot. I watch Level Cap, and it's just insane chaos there. Like everyone's just killing each other left and right. Whereas in the console games, because obviously it's a tiny bit harder to be super proficient with arms, you have to be more careful about it. And this is on the Xbox One, which is 64-player servers, just like the PC. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, that's interesting. I mean, I'm not going to say that having, access to better aim makes tactics less necessary. I mean, in some games are going to be less tactical. But I mean, think of Counter-Strike. I mean, it's as much tactical as it is, twitch aiming. And I mean, there's plenty of games where I don't think that's going to hold true, but I'm not particularly familiar with that game. So yeah, I'll defer to your judgment on that, on how the different communities tend to play the game.
Who typed the live stream in German on Twitter?
German, huh? I didn't know we had German fans.
Hey, great, we're international now. I mean, I guess we already are, but
No, I have like 1 or 2 YouTube subscribers in the UK and Germany, I believe. But whatever, I shall get to them because I'm actually going to finish up editing a Let's Play for you guys. Anyways, The Order 1886 released to mediocre reviews. It's sitting at 65 on Metacritic, which as everyone knows, it's like 6.5 out of 10. Oh, it's absolute crap, right?
especially for an exclusive.
Yeah. The worst review I can see is 20 by Digital Trends, but most of the big sites like Digital Spy, Destructoid, The Escapist, it's hovering around 60 to 50. There is one review that's like 95 by Gaming Trends. It's like, this is a cinematic masterpiece.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. Wait. Let me show you the entire review. There's like there's a lot of paragraphs, and the most discussed thing about the game is the cinematicness of the game and the soundtrack. Now, he does describe the gameplay, but it's reading these things. Reading about the gameplay, it's tough to say what actually the game is about, really. I mean, he mentions there's QuickTime events, but other than that, he doesn't go into specifics much with the gameplay. He mostly spends the rest of the time fawning over the cinematic graphics and the soundtrack. It's really quite something. He's actually battling the comment section right now. It's actually
I believe it, because he's full of crap. Did you guys see the pictures posted about the game where people showed like reused enemies, and like your final boss is actually just a reskin of like a previous boss?
It's not even a reskin. They're the same. Same model. Same everything.
Oh, it's worse than I thought.
So the final boss shares animations, shares same camera placement as a previous enemy facing the game, which is just a no-name mook. And they didn't bother changing anything, really.
Isn't the QuickTime event the same thing too?
Yeah, the whole fight, the whole final fight sequence is just one big QuickTime event, and it's just incredibly dull watching. In doing research for my article, I actually spent some time watching gameplay footage, mostly because I was looking to see if the field of view ever changed, because of course the game has this particular aspect ratio of 2.4 to 1, supposedly to make it more cinematic, but they haven't really taken advantage of this in any way by making use of a wider field of view, which is kind of surprising. But then again, when you take into account the technical limitations of the game and the fact that even at 30 FPS it still stutters, it's rather understandable why they would do that. Because of course, if you have a wider field of view, then there is more stuff that you have to render.
Well, you know what? I wouldn't mind like a great-looking game running at 30 frames per second. Like, if you can't make 60, at least make it run consistently smooth at 30, right? I wouldn't mind a great-looking game, one that looks absolutely stunningly realistic, running at 30 frames per second. If that's the only frame rate they can manage to run consistently.
Well, see, wouldn't it running at 30 frames per second, if you're talking about a game that's going to be stunningly realistic and it's running at 30 frames per second, I'd have to guess that lack of fluid motion is only going to make it the uncanny valley, make the uncanny valley.
Well, Battlefield 3 looks amazing on the Xbox 360 and it runs at 30.
Being as I am a PC user, that question to me is rather moot, because I will always be able to find ways to disable post-processing effects like depth of field, etc., to find a way to make compromises so I do get performance as well as a image that looks acceptable to me.
Yeah, same here. The only difference is I don't play games that look realistic. I only like stylized games.
And what I don't understand is why console users have to be stuck with this prepackaged experience after so many years.
Because of the cost, right? Building a high-end game, even just a medium gaming PC, costs like at least $700 or more, right?
What I mean is this: why don't console users, for example, have a choice between having anti-aliasing off, or having it on, or having it on with 8x or 16x multi-sampling? Something like that would be very, very simple to implement. And
actually, there's an interesting thing there. BioShock Infinite on the Xbox 360 actually had graphics options like that. You could turn what is it? Locking frame rates. What is the term for that? VSync. You could turn it on or off. I think you couldn't turn anti-aliasing off, but VSync was an option there, and it had other graphics options available that I can't name off the top of my head, but it was there. So maybe later on in the Xbox One's lifespan, they'll start letting those options out into the wild.
Yeah, I mean, if it is indeed something that Microsoft is limiting, but it's like Frank brought up earlier with since they're all running on x86 architecture and everything should be ported to PC anyway. If they're going to end up programming some of that stuff for PC, they might as well do it for the consoles as well.
Well, it's gonna be a while. I don't really know if Microsoft are ever going to bite the bullet and start releasing Xbox games for the PC, because at the end of the day, it's really just about controlling the capital. You want to move users to your platform, and if your platform is the Xbox One, you want to buy the Xbox One. You don't want them to buy a Intel TM Ultrabook or whatever instead.
Yeah.
Yeah. Obviously, there are many examples of stuff like that happening. Like you saw, PS3 limits its stuff. Nintendo notoriously won't go onto mobile.
Mm-hmm.
Even though it would make a killing, I gotta say, Nintendo, if it ported all of its games onto mobile devices, it would make billions. It would own the world.
The thing is like they make money selling hardware too. Like Nintendo's always been very good about that, and so I can see them wanting to stick with that. Like I get it. I don't agree with it. I mean I think you're right. I think if they, put their things out onto the app stores, I'm sure they can make a lot. I mean the other side of things is when you buy a portable game for your console, like you have no problem spending $20 to $40. Whereas if you put a game on the app store, you're going to sell it for $1. I mean that's just how it goes.
It's going to be a $1.20.
Yeah. So I mean that's going to be, there's going to be a lower perceived value of it.
Mm-hmm. And of course, Nintendo, they're sitting on quite a lot of amassed capital, so they've I do know that they bled quite a lot during at least 2013 and 2012, but they can keep bleeding for pretty much how long they ever want,
Yeah.
and they'll still be fine. And again, it's all about controlling the capital. So I don't foresee this status quo when it comes to platform divisions ever.
I think we maybe got one more console generation in us, maybe at most, and then it'll switch over entirely to PCs or smart TVs or something like that.
Yeah, because the thing is, of course, that Microsoft's Xbox division has been bleeding billions of dollars for many, many years, and there's quite a lot of people, investors in Microsoft that would like.
I wouldn't worry so much about the money sometimes. They make quite a hell of a cultural impact.
Sure. And it's clear, of course, that Microsoft are playing the long game with this. And if you look at Sony, on the other hand, Sony as a company has been bleeding money for a long time, but their console division hasn't. Their console division has been making a lot of money. And there's a number of...
Who knows how long it'll last. I'll probably get a PS4 down the line, but...
Sure.
I heard rumors that they were looking to try and... I heard rumors that there was a couple of activist shareholders trying to sell off the console division, so we'll see where everything goes in a few years.
Maybe, but then considering as the console division of Sony is their main cash cow, I'm not sure they'd want to let go of that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's the other thing. Sony also makes money selling insurance in Japan, so that's a thing.
Yep, that's the thing. Yeah. They also have a bank, I believe. So,
I don't know about the bank. That's great.
So yeah, Sony is an incredibly diverse corporation. They'll sell you a microwave and then offer you financial services. That's amazing. Yeah,
I heard Burger King has a bank though too. So having a bank is nothing special.
So the other thing we were talking about the order, it's supposed to be really short, right, Frank?
Oh yeah.
There's a lot of conversation about that.
Of course, the Let's Play guy that I was watching for the gameplay footage when I was researching it, his name was Play Me Through on YouTube, and he uploaded the entire game, his playthrough. And even when we're talking about complete cuts here, you die 7-8 times the same enemy, for example, he still completed the game in 5 hours and some minutes, of which more than 2 hours is just cutscenes.
Wow.
So
by cinematic,
that's almost like Metal Gear Solid 4 ratios right there.
Yeah. At least Metal Gear Solid 4 had great gameplay, and it lasted much longer.
Well, oh my god. I mean, this is a full price $60 release, and this has been brought up. That lasts 3 hours of gameplay. Now, a lot of people complain about Gone Home and its 1.5 hour length. But that was $20. Mm-hmm. You're asking people who work full-time jobs, maybe part-time jobs. You're asking them to dedicate a fairly hefty chunk of a day's pay for a game that lasts maybe 3 hours worth of gameplay. And the only thing you've got for your game to show for it is great graphics.
Yeah, no real replay, no multiplayer, right?
Mm-hmm. Beyond Two Souls, I mean, for all of its faults, and it has lots of faults, it was still at least eight hours long. So it's like it's one of my favorite games of all time. Full disclosure, but yeah, it just has more value than this.
I think the big thing, length is not a cut and dry way to rate a game.
Of course not.
If a game doesn't offer any interesting gameplay, anything new, if a game doesn't have a particular engaging or emotional story, if a game has very little replay, if a game has no multiplayer, then length becomes a problem, and that's what we're seeing in the order. It's like Frank pointed out earlier.
Speaking of the story, the story was primarily written by the founder of Ready at Dawn. I can't quite remember his name. He's an Indian man, at least, or a man of Indian heritage. So he had this idea for a story. And then when they started development of the game, once they had secured the funding from Sony, they brought on Mark Ellis, previously written, for example, the John Adams miniseries. And Mark Ellis had never played a game before. He never played a video game before. He probably never seen someone play a video game before. And I believe the limitations of that writing duo really shine through in the game, because here you have a man who has, of course, a good amount of technical expertise, and then you have a man with a lot of storytelling experience, but neither of them necessarily would have the experience to take a story and adapt it for a video game.
It's like John Carmack meeting David Cage.
Yeah, so
ouch. Was that taken as an insult? I'm sorry. I like David Cage's game Beyond Understanding. I don't take that as an insult, please. It's just
well, the way I see it, perhaps the primary failing of the Order 1886 isn't necessarily that it's short, but it's that the plot developments follow a strict path. So your choices, when you are presented with a QuickTime event, it's not, for example, as it was in Mass Effect, where you have a choice between Renegade and Paragon, and where your decision making matters. It's just do this, and then the game continues.
Right.
So there's no way to influence the development of the story one way or another. It's always going to follow a set path, meaning, of course, that if you play the game a second time, you've already spoiled the experience for yourself.
Yeah.
You know what's going to happen. And these moments with where the game switches into a very heavy cinematic / QuickTime event way of gameplay, they're going to become rote very, very quickly.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously there was a lot of criticism of Beyond Two Souls with that, but it's surprising how much has been revealed about that game since release. There's a lot more depth there than even reviewers were initially seeing.
Mm.
So there's nothing wrong with the QuickTime system. It's what you do with it, and if a game
it's what you do
relies on it as a rote and it's boring, F you, game.
I mean, I'll say it's kind of an outdated mechanic. I mean, I can't say that it's not possible to do something interesting. I mean, I enjoyed Indigo Prophecy and Heavy Rain. I never got around to Beyond Two Souls, but it worked for those games. But clearly we're seeing we're seeing developers use it in games that it doesn't need to be in when most developers have actually moved past it, and I think that's shameful. I mean, wasn't Rise on the Xbox One also, super QuickTime event?
Yeah, it featured in QuickTime events very heavily, even though the developers didn't seem very keen on admitting it. But yes.
Yeah, because it's a dirty word,
It's become sort of a dirty word, and I don't quite understand why, because QuickTime events can be used in a way that's interesting. Of course, speaking personally, I would like to see developers, if they must make use of QuickTime events, either incorporate some degree of decision making for the player.
Yeah.
In the actions they take during these sequences, or make sure that you incorporate the same or similar controls as you find in the rest of the game.
Yeah.
So that it doesn't just come out of left field and become a button prompt where it's just press X to keep watching movie.
Yeah.
Or press X to not die.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, press X to
Kershaw.
And I mean, David Cage has done that because if your success in some of the action sequences in Heavy Rain directly influenced the plot, where if you weren't quick enough to do X, then you didn't get, good ending number 27 because so-and-so didn't last or whatever. But yeah, I mean, if it's just press X to advance plot and to not die, then, ultimately it's just what could have been a quick cinematic or what could have been brought forth in gameplay itself is instead distracting game of Simon Says instead of either.
Yeah,
Good
because
gameplay or good cinema.
ask pretty much anyone what their favorite cinematic from a video game is, and I'm going to give you a ton of examples. But I can bet you that none of them is going to say this QuickTime event was
Yeah.
really, really cinematic, and that's what I remember fondly. No one does that.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's maybe one or two cinematic. Beyond Two Souls is just this one big gigantic cinematic thing, so it's one of my favorite games of all time. But in terms of cutscenes and stuff, yeah, it's very tough coming up with an example in video games where there's a cutscene I love on the same scale as one of my favorite movies.
Yeah, certainly not.
It's very, very tough. I can imagine there was one or two in Halo 4 actually. That game had wonderful cinematics. It's just too bad Cortana was a complete stupid character in that game. I feel bad.
Diablo 2's cinematics will always lie very close to my heart.
No,
Mostly
it's just
because-
that the actress in that game, I forget her name for Cortana. She basically is like, "I will not allow you to leave this planet." It sounded like she was trying not to scream too loud in order to not clip the mic.
No.
She's still clipping the mic anyways. You can hear it.
You might as well give up.
That was a terrible performance. And people were saying, "Oh, it's an amazing performance." It's like, no, please, excuse yourself from the room. You do not get to judge a good performance if you say that that's a good performance. It wasn't. Rant over. Sorry.
But yeah, so
anyway,
I mean, you go.
I was just wanting to say that Diablo 2 is perhaps one of the best games in the sense that it integrated a cinematic story. It was truly cinematic. With the game's gameplay. When you completed a chapter, you sort of got a sneak peek at what lay ahead through the eyes of Marius, and Marius is unusually for games a very, very tragic character. A very, very tragic character. Something that games typically don't dwell on. God of War tried to, I suppose, in a way, but it was more in an edgy way, because you know that whatever happened, Kratos was going to come back and rip someone's heart out.
Yeah. I mean, I think Kratos in God of War was a great tragic character, but now he's just angry all the time and kills things.
Yeah, he's just angry all the time and kills things.
Yeah.
So it sort of ruins the impact of the character, whereas in Diablo 2,
all I gotta say on QuickTime events,
the shit that Marius would have had to live through, and some of it is frankly unsettling.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm with you. Diablo 2 did have just wonderful cinematics. I think I still have that cinematic disc somewhere. Physical media, haha! But yeah, I don't know where my play disc is, but I think I still have the cinema disc somewhere.
Yeah. The only thing I'll say on QuickTime events as they relate to all this cinematic stuff, Beyond Two Souls is probably the best example I've ever seen of it.
As you've said many times now.
Yeah.
Of it working, and I will say that to the end of I'll say that to the grave. Okay, it's amazing.
Yeah.
The story is complete crap in that game.
David Cage for life, right?
No, not even for life. The story is complete crap. David Cage as a writer is amazingly awful, but the game itself is just like it's almost like you're going to see an average movie, right? Mm-hmm. What you're thinking is an average movie, but then you see a couple of performances in it by the actors that are so amazing that it just makes the film better than it should be, like The Blind Side.
Mm-hmm.
But the performances in that by Tim McGraw, Sandra Bullock, they made that film, which should have been an average film, that just completely flew under everyone's radar into I won't say a great, but a very good film.
Well, I haven't seen it, so I can't comment.
I don't watch
you just don't like Sandra Bullock, you hater.
I don't watch.
She won the Oscar in Gravity. She got robbed. She was
alright in Gravity. Anyway, I'm checking out Giant Bomb now. Their review for the Order 1886. It's pretty fucking harsh, actually. Sorry, I shouldn't swear, but 2 quotes, and this is by Jeff Gerstmann, by the way. There's a word for games like the Order 1886. Rental.
Oh!
Yeah, I mean, it's you're gonna play through it once. There's no replay. It's not like it's doing anything really different than anything else. I mean, Portal only takes 4 hours, but it had an interesting gameplay mechanic and a great story. Even ignoring the fact that people could make their own levels and you could go back and play through them, it was still worth having around.
Then, of course, there was the fact that Portal came as a part of the Orange Box, which
that helps too.
The best bundle of games ever.
Probably one of the best, yes. I can't wait till Half-Life 3, Valve. Still waiting on that.
See now. We'll see at the GDC what they'll announce.
No, I don't see them announcing anything.
I won't get my hopes up. I foresee that they're probably gonna announce a couple of technical achievements and one thing or another for Steam OS, but I don't think they're going to announce a new game. Not just yet.
I mean, at best we'll get a sneak peek at some of the technical stuff that we'll see.
Look, I just don't want to fucking jinx it. Sorry.
Anyways, you know what I think? I think they'll wait till absolutely no one is discussing the game, and then they'll announce it.
Probably.
It's like, oh, hi, the game you aren't talking about anymore? We're releasing it next year.
There's some sadistic people. They've kept us on the ropes now for a decade.
Yeah.
But,
anyways. Speaking of PAX East.
Speaking of PAX East, yeah.
What about it?
Yeah, what's happening at PAX East? I know Chris is trying to go. I'll have to ask him about that, actually. Is he trying to go? Because I'm going to PAX Prime in Seattle. Even if I don't get a press pass or anything, I'm going. And I'm going to make a nuisance out of myself. Because I love video games, my friend. I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it.
I have a couple of friends that are going to PAX East, but I can't make it. I already have plans that weekend.
It's okay.
How long does it run?
3 or 4 days, I think.
It's like a weekend.
Just 3. All right. New topic. Game sales. The ultimate game sale on the Xbox One. I bought Lords of the Fallen for $10. Mirror's Edge for $3.
Oh. Not bad.
Yep.
I probably wouldn't like to play it on the Xbox, but Mirror's Edge is a wonderful game.
Yeah, I hear. Obviously, I watched Yahtzee's review, and that's the most hilarious thing ever.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's like it does kind of hold true though. If you can't really see your feet.
Yeah, what you want to do is, of course, increase the field of view as much as you can. That's a great help.
Which you can't do on the Xbox 360.
Which you can't do on the Xbox 360, of course. And then, too, on the PC, you have the added freedom of keyboard mouse controls, which means you can pull off some moves you might not be able to do on the Xbox. I'm not quite sure about that.
Actually, funny story. Medal of Honor Frontline. I tried playing that just a month or so ago.
Mm-hmm.
And it's still a great game. The field of view makes you look like you're trapped in a box, though, sometimes.
Hey, Medal of Honor Frontline, wasn't that the game that was based in part on the plot of Saving Private Ryan?
Oh, the first Medal of Honor was based on that, based on the atmosphere around it. But Medal of Honor Frontline did have the Normandy landings. It's still an amazing game. Like, the sound design holds up. Almost every single thing about it holds up today. It's amazing.
Yeah, particularly the soundtrack is what I remember that game.
It's got such a great melodic line to it. It's like
just the music, menu music is fantastic.
Arnhem Nights. It's got a full orchestral soundtrack. Michael Giacchino is an amazing arranger and composer for that sort of thing for the Medal of Honor series. But Medal of Honor Frontline is his peak. Like it is easily in the top 25 video game soundtracks of all time. A lot of people haven't listened to it though, so that's why you don't see it on many lists, which is a damn shame.
If you haven't listened to the Medal of Honor Frontline soundtrack, do yourself a favor and check it out, because that soundtrack is impeccable.
Oh, yeah. It is beyond impeccable, my friend.
Is it
It is a
impeccable at
masterpiece.
just enhancing the mood of the game, or is it? I mean, I've never played a Medal of Honor game.
You don't even have to
Stand-
play the
Will
game.
it be
Just buy
good
the soundtrack.
by itself?
Yes, it
It will
is.
be good by itself.
I
Yeah.
value soundtracks not as they are in the game. I value them outside of the game more than anything. Halo 2, best soundtrack ever made. I will, except for Skyrim. Sorry, Skyrim, Halo 2, Medal of Honor Frontline, Journey, Hotline Miami 2, Minecraft, Zombies by Big Nick, Snapshot. Great soundtracks. We actually have a list on our YouTube channel, a top 10 indie game soundtracks of all time. You should go check that out.
Yeah, I'll say Hotline Miami's definitely had a good soundtrack. My favorite soundtrack is probably the soundtrack to Mad World for the Wii, because that stands alone by itself as an excellent hip hop album. To the point that like people have like been like, oh, what artist is this? I was like, oh, it's a soundtrack to Mad World, and like it just blows people's mind because it just sounds like a really well put together hip hop album. I'm also very partial to No More Heroes soundtrack.
Lots of energetic stuff. I mean, I gotta listen to more energetic video game soundtracks, but a lot of those ones that I listen to, they almost seem like they're just energetic just for the sake of being energetic, and they don't carry out outside the game itself. But I will definitely try and check that out.
Perhaps. Speaking of Minecraft, of course, full disclosure, family member is lead developer of Minecraft, but I do believe that the soundtrack that C418, whatever his name is, did for that game contributed very, very greatly to the early success of it, because it lends itself so very, very well to the basic atmosphere of the game, just exploring a procedurally generated world and tinkering with blocks. And it only comes on now and then too, so it's sort of like having a little special moment when the soundtrack comes on.
Yeah, I mean, Skyrim, Jeremy Soule, just like flat out, every track on that soundtrack is something that could stand on its own. It's amazing stuff. One of my favorite gaming memories, period, is the first time I played Skyrim, I went left to Falkreath first, and just the music playing during that, the rain, the mountains, everything. It's just, I still get goosebumps sometimes thinking about that.
You played Skyrim on the 360, right?
Oh yes, it's a buggy. It's a frame rate chugging mess now that I have all the DLC, but it's still a better game than 99% of what has come out since.
Yeah, speaking of Skyrim, I'm not quite sure if the developers intended for it to be pronounced Skyrim or Skyrim, seeing as it's based in part on Norse mythology.
Well, it doesn't have the umlauts above it, right?
Well, why?
Skyrim.
Why, of course, would it be pronounced?
Every game character who pronounces Skyrim in the game pronounces it Skyrim anyways, so...
I guess.
Yeah. So nice try there, Frank. Nice try.
I mean, maybe he's onto something. Maybe in like their first meeting for the names, somebody was like, "We should call it Skyrim," and everyone was like, "Yeah, it's really good." Except everyone's gonna screw that up, so let's just call it Skyrim instead.
Well, I'm not denying the possibility. I mean, I can't wait till the next Elder Scrolls game. I wonder what they're going to do with it. If they go to, not Tamriel, some other place, elsewhere, that would be great. Any other? What's the area that the Argonians come from? I keep forgetting that name. It's not elsewhere. It's somewhere else. Oh, whatever. Or the area where the Red Guards come from. That would be a nice, interesting locale.
Perhaps. Isn't that included in Elder Scrolls Online, though?
Who cares?
You're not wrong.
Well, I've been looking into that game because it's coming on free to play. Well, you have to pay, and then it's free to play for the Xbox One later on this year.
Thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
You have to buy the $60 game before you can start playing. But I'm looking forward to at least trying it out. I heard that it wasn't that great, though, so...
Well, I actually haven't heard anyone even mention it for the past half year, at least.
Yeah.
So
well,
I guess it didn't do all that great.
Yeah. Well, I was gonna nominate it for best original song because Malika wrote a song for the game, and you know who
Mhm.
Malika is, right? She did that amazing cover of Dragonborn.
Yeah.
Yeah. She wrote a song for the Elder Scrolls. Uh, the the Beauty of Dawn. It's amazing. You should listen to that. Probably wouldn't have won though. It would have been a tie between it and a song from Child of Light. But speaking of great soundtracks, listen to Child of Light, please. For the love of God, drop everything. Go listen to Child of Light, please. There. Okay.
Child of Light. Okay. Who composed
Uh,
that?
it's the artist is Cote de Pirate or something. It's a French
So,
name.
Côte de Pirate?
Cote de Pirate.
Mhm.
Yeah, something like that.
Well, check it out.
Yeah. Yeah. So what games have you guys been playing?
Well, I've been so busy these past like 2 weeks with work. I've had very little downtime for actual gaming, but I'm still learning Dota 2, so that's fun. It's been nowhere near as complicated as people make it out to be. Don't get me wrong, it's still a really complex game, but I've picked it up way better than I thought I would. Um, and people have not been terrible. I've only had one or two assholes that I've had to deal with, and I've reported both of them and got those reports back, so that's cool.
Mm-hmm.
I'm guessing they were Peruvians.
I think one was there was I was in one match and there was two guys who were both from South America and were just going back and forth, and one was particularly bad and was kind of the instigator and was using lots of colorful language and bigoted language. I'm like, I'm gonna go ahead and report you for that, and got that report back the next day. It was great.
It's almost like that's the proper response for dealing with assholes on the internet. Wow.
You just ignore them, and if they get particularly bellicose, you just report them and move on.
Yeah, I mean he was a bad player too. Like he struck me as somebody who he probably knew more than us, so to speak. Like he thinks he's an expert, but really like Dunning-Kruger effect. Like he knows enough to be dangerous, but he doesn't actually know what he's doing. So he's giving us tips on how to play while he's refusing to group up with us so that we lose every team fight.
Yeah, I mean, one of my faults is that I have extreme gamer rage sometimes. Um, Whoever has played me online knows this. Um, and I try and like mitigate it. I try to deal with it, obviously. But if I'm an asshole to you, you have every right to block me.
Yeah.
Like, do that.
No, I spent a good number of years dabbling in the fighting game community, and my now roommate, although we were just friends back then, his name is Nas in the community, and he's nowhere near as angry as he used to be, and he's simultaneously still the angriest person I know when it comes to gaming. Like I've seen him pop off on guys. There used to be, I don't think it's on YouTube anymore, but there used to be a video of him throwing a controller. It just like he's a lot better, but he still gets heated sometimes.
Oh yeah, I've had people telling me to tone it down, so I'm doing my best. Jeez. It's not an easy issue. I mean, some people could say it's like dealing with any angry person. The point is to not poke the bear and say calm the fuck down.
Yeah.
If you say that, you're just gonna make them angrier.
Speaking from experience, are you?
Yeah. Oh yeah, I can say that people who have told me to calm down, that's just made me angrier. You wait for the person to calm down.
Yeah, I mean, calm down is generally just a bad term in general. Like,
Yeah.
working customer service as long as I've had, like, calm down will never get the person to calm down.
No.
Yeah.
Anyways, so let's move on to happier topics.
Happy
Or
topics.
happy. What?
What do we have?
Yeah, what do we have? We have Law and Order SVU.
We covered that last week.
Yeah, we covered that last week.
Yeah, that's dead and buried. Let's talk about Adrian. Frank, can you get that last name for me?
Jmilars.
Thank you.
There we go. A fallout from Law and Order. SVU.
Yeah. So
so
he's been
Mark Curran put out this petition, right?
Yeah.
Calling for more reasonable reporting on gamers from particularly Kotaku and Polygon, who have written quite a bit about a certain hate mob, as they describe it. And following that, of course, Adrian Chmielarz called out specifically indie developer Rami Ismail for describing these people as a hate group, and mentioned attempting to use, actual statistical evidence to show that you can't really back that up with any observation.
Yeah. As he put it, it took him 2 days of looking into the issue to change his stance on it. And he considered writing something, but he's like, I can't say anything that nobody hasn't already said, and I'm not going to convince anybody who doesn't want to be convinced, because, if you spent the last 7 months thinking one way and either haven't looked into it, or have looked into it and still want to continue, with that narrative that you've constructed.
Either way, you're committed.
Yeah, you're committed. You're not going to change. But it's kicked off. Like Kern's petition has kicked off a couple other devs sounding off on it. Ken Levine has been much more active, talking about all of the issues pertaining to it and proper reporting and all that. And what's interesting is the reporting narrative itself is starting to show up more and more, even decoupled from the hashtag, even to the point that Jonathan Blow, who's clearly not in favor of anything, going off on Polygon for reporting that his new game, The Witness, only takes 5 hours because the developer managed to speedrun it in 5 hours.
Yeah, even Penny Arcade got in on mocking Polygon for that.
Yeah.
It's hilarious. I mean, obviously, yes.
Yeah, Polygon are, of course, notorious for their lack of fact-checking, but the intimidation game episode of Law and Order has, of course, lit a powder keg now, and everyone's going off on these clickbait journals. Total Biscuit, he was a loose cannon the other day too.
Yeah, Nathan Grayson actually. I gotta interject. Nathan Grayson actually pseudo defended himself, almost saying like sometimes gamers are assholes, and we cover that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, but you're doing it in such ways to make everyone else seem like an asshole, Sure. I actually tweeted to Jim Sterling, and it's like, why use the term gamers when you're discussing some?
Yeah, it's one of the things. It's like,
and of course the issue too is that if you're going to report on people being assholes, you want to make damn sure that they're actually being assholes, because otherwise you fall into a tricky territory called slander.
Yeah.
The only reason there has been a case brought forward of libel or slander against some of these people so far is because it costs a lot of money to do so.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I guarantee you.
You go.
Oh, I guarantee you, if money wasn't a factor, a case would have been brought forward.
Yeah, certainly. The other thing is like, some gamers can be assholes, and we report on that. That in and of itself isn't just a justification if, one, you're doing that to support, your own narrative, and two, people need to recognize that, if you choose to only report negative news, and if you choose to focus on that, then people are going to take that, and that's going to directly affect their perception of the world. Even outside of video game journalism, people generally, Americans especially, believe the world is more violent now than it ever has been, and there's more dangers in their everyday life, when in fact most of those statistics are at an all-time low, but reporting on it is at an all-time high.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. It's a problem. Like, it always is. I mean, the problem with using the term gamers when you're talking about all these problematic gamers, it's like, come on. I mean, gamers is an identity at this point. Like, people actually identify as gamers. It doesn't matter what you think the definition is. People identify as that. When you say, oh, there are problematic gamers. It's like people don't bring race into a discussion of how much an asshole this guy. Like this one white guy I know is an asshole. It's like
Right,
what?
right. I mean, and it's like you were saying, Frank. You want to make sure you get the facts right, not just in specific cases, but you also have to look at different game communities and how they handle things differently. What looks like harassment in one community may not be one in another. Like the fighting game community is tends to be very, trash talk is common, and if you were to come out and be like, oh, we should cut down on this trash talk, that's not the community for you. But at the same time, the only thing the fighting game community...
If you can't handle that, or just walk away from it.
Yeah, like the only thing the fighting game community
right?
cares about is if you're good.
Yeah,
That's
well,
really
to a
it.
certain extent, like you remember that famous incident where that one guy was actually like sexually harassing this one woman on a reality show, right? And then he was defending it like that's part of the fighting game community. Well, to a certain extent, you gotta. It's called tact, people. Just be nice. Just be.
Sure.
Trash talk during a game is fine, right?
I
like
mean,
trash
here's the
talk
thing,
is
though,
like regular
like-
trash talk. Like you suck. Like you need to learn more about this game, or yeah, take that, you fucking noob, or something like that.
Here's the thing,
Well,
like that.
my
that particular
personal
instance-
opinion on that is, of course, it's immature, and especially when you see, I believe it was 2 years ago, a Call of Duty pro team acting like complete fucking children. Sorry.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, I mean, like, that's...
they were really, really, really immature, and they just exploded with this juvenile scorn at their opponents. Of course, they were losing too. That it became a news story that they were such vile people to the people that they were playing against that they sort of ruined the perception of this being a sportsmanlike endeavor.
Yeah. Obviously, there's issues to be worked out, but there's limits. I mean, obviously, there's limits.
Sure.
But if you stay within those limits, you're fine, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, don't go up to a female member on a team and go, hey, I want to smell your hair or something, or you're pretty hot for a chick or something. You don't do that. Come on. You don't do that and defend it. No way. No how. Even if it's part of your community, you could just say, you could just walk away. No. Certain stuff, there's a line that's crossed a lot of times. If you're racist, if you're a fucking sexist, get the fuck out.
Or at least tone it down.
Yeah, or at least
But
keep yourself private. Keep your thoughts to yourself, basically, if you're going to be an asshole to everyone in public.
The problem, of course, with how the journals have approached the issue of Gamergate is they initially reported on it based on nothing more than hearsay from either their personal friends or people that they were financially involved with directly, which, of course, led to very, very skewed reporting. And instead of correcting the story, they've stuck by their guns, kept talking about supposed harassment that simply does not exist.
Or if it did happen, was blown wildly out of proportion. I remember Ben Kuchera and that infamous story on Brad Wardell, which he still hasn't apologized for, by the way.
Yeah.
And he actually refused to apologize for it because people were so mean to him on the internet.
That is so shameful, really.
Yeah. I
But then
mean,
again,
it's-
Ben Kuchera is a great big baby, and if there's any consolation to Brad Wardell, the simple fact of the matter is, of course, that Ben
Not
Kuchera
everyone hates Ben Kuchera.
everyone hates Ben Kuchera, and he has completely worn out his welcome in this industry, and there will likely not be anyone willing to hire him should he lose his job at Vox Media.
Just pray
he's
tell Ben Kuchera that Vox Media survives the year.
By attacking people over baseless allegations such as calling Total Biscuit a racist over something that was taken
that guy
out of
too.
context.
As a fellow Canadian, I apologize for Canada for that. That coward who is afraid to show his face on his own videos when he's making a statement like that. I am sorry, Total Biscuit, for all of Canada. There.
Well, the simple fact of the matter is he's painted himself into a corner where previously he had at least the option of making a graceful apology. He now has none. Whatever he says or does is only going to make people get an even worse opinion of him.
Mm-hmm. Like either one of those two, like the sock puppet guy or Ben Kuchera, they had their chance to make an apology. Now they are stuck with their opinions. In fact, the sock puppet guy, I forget his name, so I'm not even gonna bother. Dan Olson, there we go. Dan Olson. He said, "I stand by it."
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, and the real shame is, like, back in the day, I actually didn't mind Ben Kuchera's article. I read him on Penny Arcade Report, and I only really had a problem with him. You know, once Dragon Crown came out and that whole manufactured controversy, looking for reasons to get offended.
Mm-hmm. Actually, I remember on Penny Arcade there was this one article where he talking about Anita Sarkeesian's first video when it was first released, and it's fine. Like, I actually support a lot of the principles behind Anita Sarkeesian's videos. There's a lot of problems with them, but there's a lot of good stuff within them too. I think once this whole vitriol dies down, eventually everyone will start to realize the good stuff, right? Again. But there's still a hell of a lot of problems with them, and Ben Kuchera's article on that video kind of like whitewashed over all of the problems. And then he then went on in the closing paragraph of the article, went on to say, I know some people in the comments are going to try and defend that there isn't a major problem with sexism in the gaming, so I'm just going to close the comment section so I don't have to hear your defense of the sexism in the gaming industry.
Wow, yeah, I missed that. But
sexism is rather immaturity.
yeah,
it's not just immaturity in the sense that most people
never attribute to malice what can be attributed to stupidity.
Yeah. So it's not just that people who play video games tend to be rather young, but the medium as such is also very, very young too. And you do have major issues in attempting to present yourself as, you know, being a respectable art form when you don't have any critics.
Yeah.
Who approach games from, you know, a more objective and honest standpoint than what they do, because most critics today are simply put fanboys. They're enthusiasts who enthusiastically cover games, and in doing so are rarely able to deconstruct games when they do have failings. It's very encouraging to see now that people like Jeff Gerstmann dig into the Order 1886 as it should be.
Yeah, I mean, let's just say this: since this whole shebang started, I've seen game reviewers be less inclined to overly praise games. It may just be rose-colored glasses, because I do realize that there have been reviews of AAA releases beforehand which were negative, which were highly critical. But we can't also ignore that for the longest time, games journalism was just a cheerleading department for video games.
Yeah, there seems to be a shakeup in the industry. Yeah. You have, sure, on the one hand, you have actors like Kotaku and Polygon who seem to be doubling down on their behavior.
All credit to them, though. Yeah. Polygon's review for the Order 1866 or whatever, 1886, is negative and critical. All credit to them. Like, I think it's across-the-board changes in terms of game reviews. I mean, we're starting to see a lot more full range of scores being used, at least a tiny bit more.
Sure. Then you have actors such as The Escapist, for example, that have had a major shakeup. They ousted their former editor-in-chief, for example, Greg Tito, and their new editor-in-chief made a public announcement on the forum that not only, of course, previously Alexander Makros, the Escapist showrunner, said that they wanted to be more enthusiastic about games and less curmudgeonly. another new editor-in-chief said on their
Also,
forums that they would like to focus on the stuff that makes a game and not so much the politics.
Yeah.
Also, I'd like to point out that Movie Bob is gone.
I never watched his stuff.
Movie Blob.
Movie
Sorry.
Bob. Yeah, Movie Bob is gone, people. For anyone who doesn't know, I used to watch a lot of his content on the site. Escape to the Movies with a couple of decent reviews.
He's a contributor now for Badass Digest, I heard.
And I will never read that site, ever.
And he's got a Patreon.
Soapbox, I mean, when he went into attacking people for defending themselves from vicious accusations of sexism and misogyny, he went a bit overboard, let's just say. But that doesn't mean all of his opinions were invalid. I mean, the dude could make an interesting viewpoint, could make a good video. The problem was he was so...
A couple years ago when I first discovered him, I thought, well, he was fairly decent movie reviews, but then it became very, very obvious very quickly that the man's a complete and total fanboy.
Yeah, no kidding. Like Spider-Man, Amazing Spider-Man 2, worst movie of the year? Come on. What are you, fucking baby? Come on. Man of Steel, fucking worst movie of 2013, 2014? F off. Come on. You're a movie critic, not a fanboy first.
Yeah, but making those sort of controversial statements, and I mean those are more likely to spread through social media, so that gets views.
Yeah, it gets views.
Back to what you were talking about, Frank, with like the difference between enthusiasm and say like actual critical commentary afterwards. I mean, I think one of the big problems is like when it comes to reviews, we generally want that sort of like objective, is this a good game or not? I think the failing is that, and this is probably why sort of subjective criticism started to come bundled with reviews, is there's not a long leg on most games when it comes to coverage, right? Like if you write an article about a game 6 months after it came out, it's not going to get a lot of attention. And that's a shame, because I don't mind those sort of look backs and how does the game look 6 months from now? Let's talk about these specific aspects. Decoupled from a review, but sort of that in-depth kind of breakdown of games.
Yeah, because there are, of course, a number of games that change very, very greatly from their initial release.
Yeah. I still think...
Especially when the mods are involved.
I still think initial reviews are valuable as a moment in time spotlight.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously.
What I'm saying is I think there needs to be more, just writing, and not only, I mean, there has to be an audience there, and, maybe not enough people want this, but, post-mortem 6 months after the fact, character studies, after the fact, when we have time to, really engage with the characters and really take them all in. I mean, reviews are there to, let us know if we want to buy the game or pat us on the back for buying the game, so to speak, or for passing on the game if it's crap. But I don't know. Like half my enjoyment of reading about video games doesn't come from reviews. It's very rare that I'll read just a straight review. I'd rather discussion about certain aspects of the game itself, about specific design decisions, and to a lesser degree, story and character design.
Yeah, I mean, YouTube has monetized this. Like the discussion of games after the fact, YouTube has found a way to monetize it, which is why it's funny when a lot of these gaming websites say Polygon and Kotaku, very large media websites, I should add, saying nobody reads our long form articles. Why? Maybe just look to YouTube. Maybe people just prefer watching videos, and
I prefer long form articles. I mean, like, I enjoyed reading the Penny Arcade report. I enjoy more news about and writings about games rather than just straight reviews. But the problem comes with I have different takes on a number of different issues, and I feel that a lot of the writing that is going on about games and game culture is purposely slanted in such a way and, is looking for reasons to get upset rather than actually finding legitimate grievances outside of low-hanging fruit.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and frankly, that's my problem with the feminist frequency videos. Like the core concept, hey, about better representation of women in games. I'm all for that. Yeah, I'm on board. That's great. But then it devolves into effectively call-out culture of looking. We've made up our mind and we're gonna find a few examples for it, rather than actual good cultural criticism.
Mm-hmm. I mean, like, yeah, she did point out some weird examples of stuff that happened in the past, more than focusing on going forward in the future. You know?
I think Liana K's articles really kind of hit the nail on the head for a lot of that. Her fifth response to feminist frequency, talked about like the issues that should be addressed and theoretically feminist frequency should be addressing, but are failing to, and said just looking to tear down what's there and, like I said, to go after low-hanging fruit or misrepresent things or fail to view things in a larger context. And instead, the perfect, if you took all of feminist frequencies, negative call-outs and points and rebuilt the game industry built on that, we'd be poorer for it.
Mm-hmm. Well, we're coming up on our time limit here, so any closing thoughts?
Any closing thoughts? No, not really. I mean, regarding feminist frequency, my personal opinion on feminist frequency, Jonathan McIntosh and Nita Sarkeesian, is that their methods are very deeply flawed.
Yeah.
And in many ways, they are quite actively dishonest in the way they present issues. But certainly there is a discussion to be had about representation of women in video games, but it has more to do with the quality of writing that goes into video games and less as a gender-specific issue.
Yeah, I agree completely. I mean, it's not like writing in video games or characterization in video games is ever, is often great anyway. I mean, most of our male characters are, angsty badasses and, bald space marines and...
I'm trying to find a quotable line from video game history that isn't just an ironically quoted nowadays out of nostalgia. I can't think of one. The writing needs to improve first before we can think of just like straight up, oh, let's have 50-50 representation.
Yeah. Let's
fix the writing first, because if we don't get the writing there, all the people who are going to be there are going to be stupid characters. Yeah. And you don't want stupid. Trust me, you don't.
You can have a mulatto, transsexual, otherkin character if you want, sure. But if the quality of writing going into presenting that character isn't up to snuff, then, especially when it comes to more contentious issues such as issues of homosexuality, as in Gone Home, if the quality of writing isn't up to snuff, what that is going to do in cases where people are already more or less convinced that gays are satanic in origin, it is going to reinforce their views. It's not going to change the way they look at things if they come across a poorly written gay character who is attempting to preach their salvation to them. Mm-hmm. It's not going to happen.
Yeah, and I mean, without that good writing first and foremost, I mean, it's just going to come off as pandering tokenism.
Exactly.
And no one wants that. Like, I mean, I'm Aboriginal. Like,
no one wants that.
For Aboriginal characters, I think Aboriginals have a rich vein of history that could be exploited for a good video game, like Skyrim-ish kind of stuff. But I don't want that to happen, and then the writing be absolutely terrible and the performances be terrible, like Connor in Assassin's Creed 3, one of the worst Aboriginal things out there ever in the history of anything ever. I want him to die. Like, that character is just awful, 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 terribly written stuff. I do not want that.
Yeah, or just look at the difference between the world building that was lost between Dragon Age Origins and now Dragon Age Inquisition. They increased the diversity scale, but the world itself has less character. They changed certain peoples in there, and it just ends up falling flat. It's there if you want to, click check marks, but it's a less believable, less well-rounded world.
Mm-hmm. Well, it had more diverse characters, so Game of the Year.
Yeah.
Game of the Year.
And with that, this has
3 weeks after release. Game of the Year.
Yep.
And with that, this has been the Twodashstash Podcast. Thank you for joining us. We hope to see you next time on the Stash.
Tune in next time.